Welcome to the WP show, the WordPress show. First things first, yeah, drop a comment in so I can make sure that the actual audio is working. It does take a while sometimes for the comments to come through, but there we go. I'm Joel Hughes and I run Glass Mountains, which is a WordPress design and support company. We've been running since 2001 and have clients in the UK and the US. We have a team of about 6 people and we've been working remotely in a distributed manner for many years. So this whole COVID lockdown thing is nothing new to us. What you're watching now here is the fortnightly series aimed at businesses and organizations who use WordPress to power their websites. The aim of the show and this Facebook group that you're in is to give you help and advice to help you upskill yourselves in terms of WordPress and improve your websites. I saw a comment. Yes, Helen's there. She can hear perfectly. Right. So we don't just focus on WordPress itself. I showcase any relevant areas I think are of interest to you. And one of those areas is e-commerce, which we'll get to that in a moment. So before I introduce Nick, our guest, let me recap a couple of things. This is the final event for the summer. I know that's really, really upsetting, but come on, get a grip, people. We will be back in September with a fresh new season. And I might do a mini live event in August. We'll see. Now, talking of September, during that month, I'm going to launch the beta version of the WP Power Academy. That's the WordPress Power Academy, an extra membership program for people who want to take the next steps on their WordPress journey, upskilling themselves and improving their website in a more structured format. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for more of that. Oh, yes, I've got a nice shiny logo for that. So let me show you that. Yes, there's the WordPress Power Academy logo. So whenever you see that logo, that will remind you of what's coming up in September. Okay, right, on with the show. So let's have a little look here. Our guest today is Nick Boyce. Oh, I should get Nick on the screen for this, shouldn't I? Nick, you there? Oh, you got my logo on top of you. That's a bit unfair.
I'm here.
Let me take that off. Nick's there. Awesome. Nick is the founder of Pollinary, an e-commerce marketing agency specializing in social advertising, PPC, analytics, and insights. He has 20 years experience, so he's old like me, across e-commerce, web development, and digital marketing. In addition to founding Pollinary, he's also the co-host of the Facebook Marketing Meetup in London. Right, in terms of questions, in a moment, Nick's going to kick off. If you have any questions, please just ask away, during it or whatever. Oh, yes, and don't forget that if you do ask a question, where's that thing gone? Oh, it's on the other thing. The eCam link, if you can click that, then when you ask a question, your face appears next to the comment. Now, if I clumsily manage to miss your question, don't worry. I will go back and check everything later on, and I'll make sure we get answers for you in terms of the show notes. And again, don't worry if you need to vanish before the end, because I know we're all leading busy lives. I will be posting the replay out at the start of next week with any show notes or any links and stuff, so you can get in touch with Nick if need be. Phew, that's not bad. Nick, is there anything else you want to say before we start, mate?
Wow, no, I don't think I could do it better than that, Joel.
That's pretty good, isn't it? Let's be honest. Right, how do you want to start? Do you want me to get you over to your slides?
Yes, please.
Okie dokie. Right, so you might need to share that screen again because you bombed out the Skype, didn't you?
So I did. Bear with.
So whilst that's happening, I'll play various noises like a triangle. Or party noise. That's not much of a party noise. Right.
How's that looking?
It's just got the... yes. If you go full screen on that now, you're laughing.
We're in business?
We are cooking with...
Great.
Okay.
Excellent.
Nick, go for it, man.
Away I go. Okay, nice to be here. And thanks for the invitation, Joel. So I'll just crack on here. So we're going to talk about e-commerce, and within that, we're going to talk about marketing e-commerce specifically. And it's kind of a top-level overview and really is designed to invite questions towards the end. So please do jump in with those questions. Here are the 3 main things we're going to cover today. So which metrics really matter in e-commerce? It's actually surprisingly simple, the metrics that you use to measure e-commerce. It's once you get below the surface of it that it gets quite difficult and gray area. Which channels are right for you? So SEO, PPC, paid social, etc. How do you make decisions about how you drive traffic to your store? And what sorts of mistakes do people commonly make as they're going on their e-commerce journey? So I'll just jump straight in. A little bit about me before we get there. So Joel introduced me earlier, so I'm the founder of Pollenry. We focus on e-commerce brands, and within that we focus on Facebook and Instagram ads predominantly. Prior to that, I was an e-commerce director at King & McGaw, so I have e-commerce in my DNA at this point. First point, so which metrics really matter? A question I get all the time is, what's a good conversion rate? Everyone knows that more is better, but there's no real singular answer for what a good conversion rate is. But to look at conversion rate, so we have conversion rate is a key part, obviously, of your metric mix, and the revenue that you generate is the product of the sessions, so the number of people that you bring through to your site. These are people or users. Your conversion rate, which is the percentage of those users that you convert into customers, and the average order value, or AOV, and this is how much people spend on an average order. So if you multiply all of those together, you get your revenue.
Great.
Now, within that, we could have a conversion rate that is 10%, for example, and we could bring 1,000 people through to the store. And if they spend £100 each, we generate £10,000. But equally, we could drive many more people through to the store and convert far fewer of them. And if they spend the same amount, you make the same amount. So we can, 1% in this example is just as good as 10% in this example. And in the final example, we've got here, if we only bring 1,000 people through to the store and we convert 1% of them, but they spend £1,000 each, it's the same amount again. So this is really intended to kind of illustrate that depending on what you're selling and how much consideration period there is and how much demand there is for the product, your conversion rate could vary pretty wildly. But broadly speaking, I think industry standards for a good e-commerce rate are somewhere between 2 and 5% for a general store.
Right.
They can go as high as 10 or more percent. But certainly with the clients that we work with, they're probably closer to the 1s, 2s, and 3s.
Okay.
Right, but what actually matters is profit. So it doesn't matter if you generate a bunch of sales if you don't profit on them. So what does profit actually mean? So I've asterisked that profit. What I actually mean is profit contribution. So the revenue that we calculated in the previous step, from that, this is how much is coming into your bank account from the thank you for your order page.
Yep.
From that, we need to deduct tax for the tax man. We've got to deduct the discounts that you might have given away, which are really a cost to your business. The cost of goods, so this is how much it costs to buy or manufacture the goods, and generally includes how much it costs to ship them to the customer. If you paid for ad spend, that's also included in there, and you'd probably mix in the agency fees as well. So by the time you've subtracted all of those away, the number that remains is what we call your profit contribution, and that goes towards your operating expenses, so salaries and offices if you have such a thing, and future investments in your business. And this simple calculation is just a really important one to get right, and one that we see that a lot of businesses, even at larger sizes, don't really pay enough attention to. So I'll give you an example. This is probably quite an intimidating table of numbers, and hopefully it's legible on the screens that you're viewing this on. But I'll show you how it breaks down, and it's all based off of what I showed in the previous slides. So this is one of our client accounts. This column here is how much revenue they brought in during this particular month. So this is last month. This is how much they spent on their advertising, including the agency fees. So that in that case was our fees. So they, after discounts, they brought in 486,000. They spent almost 99,000 on advertising. The cost of goods here, so this is their manufacturing cost. In their case, they're a manufacturing business. Their margins determine what this cost is. And once we take away these advertising costs and the cost of goods away from that, is what we get as our profit contribution. In this particular table, we haven't included taxes, but that's basically what remains there.
So Nick, they're obviously not shy of spending money on advertising there then.
No, that's right, Joel. And I mean, this is a business that was really founded on paid customer acquisition. And you can see here in the right-hand column, this is what they were spending during the equivalent period the previous year, so 47,000, which, don't get me wrong, is still a lot of money,
Yeah.
but they've more than doubled their media spend during that period. And that's really to a large extent down to additional demands created by COVID. So this company sells products that are in the home interiors category.
Yeah.
People spending a lot more time in their home interiors. They're looking to make them nicer. So they were really able to capitalize on additional demand there. So what we kept an eye on there was this figure here, so revenue to acquisition costs. So our target there is to keep that at about 20%. And if we do that, we know that they're going to scale profitably. So our goal was to increase this spending in a way that was guaranteed to be profitable for them.
Yeah, I get it. Good. Excellent.
Yeah. So hopefully that demonstrates the sort of moving parts that go into how you calculate revenue, what conversion rate actually means, and what the variables are within that, and what profit means within an e-commerce business.
Yeah.
So great. So another important figure, which is slightly more difficult to get our heads around, is LTV, or customer lifetime value. So this one depends on how often people are coming back to your site to buy and how much they're spending when they do it, and what you consider to be, or what the data suggests, is the customer's lifespan. So for example, if you're in a business that sells shavers and shaving blades, or something that's replenishable, your lifetime value is really the key metric you're looking for there, because you're going to have that customer for a long time and they're going to continue buying those products for you. If you're in the business of selling sofas, say, the replacement cycle for those is very long. I would guess it's probably 6 or 7 years. And so therefore, the buying frequency is so long, it's very difficult to rely on customer lifetime value there. Most businesses are somewhere in between those two extremes. So it's good to have a look at these figures here. So average order value that we talked about before, how often people are coming back to buy when they do, and what percentage of them do, and what a typical time period is that people will engage with your business. There's various different and much more sophisticated ways to calculate customer lifetime value, but that gives you a sense of what goes into it.
Yeah.
And for many businesses, this is where profit comes. It's much easier to sell to a customer you already have than to find a new one.
Yeah, agree.
Great. So on to the next one. So choosing the right channels. You've got a store and you've got a sense of what you sell and how much it costs to sell and all those metrics we talked about before. How do you drive people to your site? There's different ways of looking at that again. This is a classic kind of marketing funnel. So this one's called AIDA. Awareness, interest, desire, and action. And this could be applied to anything from TV commercials and billboards and so on at this level. And down here, it might be buying it in the shop that you don't control. Now, this does have relevance for the digital marketing world, but the way that we tend to look at it is in this far simpler way here, which is, are you creating demand for your product, or are you capturing demand for your product? What I mean by that is, are you pushing out ads to an audience for people that probably didn't know they wanted your product yet? So this can work quite well in fashion or anything where you can sort of drive desire. Or are you capitalizing on people that are searching for things? So if they know that they want a set of tires for their car, or if they know that they want batteries, or like something that is very specific that people search for, and you need to be there when they're doing that if that's what you're selling. It's quite often a combination of these that works well, but the type of product that you're selling is largely going to determine which channel mix you will do here.
Right.
So it comes down to this: do they know they want what you sell? So, for example, we have a client that makes beautiful mechanical watches that are designed in Britain and made in either Switzerland or Japan. Most of the people that they're selling to have no idea that they want those watches until they see them. They're not searching for those watches. We're creating demand for those watches, and we do that through Facebook ads predominantly.
Right.
And you need to know who your customer is. So if you're creating demand, where are they hanging out? Are they a younger demographic and they're on TikTok and Snapchat? We don't really have clients that are in that space, but there's plenty that do. Are they an older generation that might be, Facebook is probably the classic place for sort of 55s to 65s, as strange as it seems. There's plenty of those on Facebook. Or somewhere in between, where it might be a mix of Instagram or Snap or YouTube or whatever. So understanding who your customer is absolutely vital here if you're pushing out ads. This is a really good book. If you're in the business of e-commerce and you're trying to find what your right channel mix is, this is a book called Traction by Gabriel Weinberg and Justin Marez. They are the founders of a search engine called DuckDuckGo, which, if you can imagine how hard it is to create a search engine that competes with Google, that's what they were up against. And this sort of goes through their journey of them deciding how they were going to bring customers to their site and experimenting with billboards and experimenting with all sorts of things. And really what they try to advocate here is creating what they call your bullseye channel. So a channel that really works and is scalable, and really just focus on that until you can't do any more. Don't try and spread yourself too thin. That's really what they advocate here. But if nothing else, this book has got just a really good, broad sense of how you could possibly find your customers, including offline things like events and billboards, magazines, and B2B and all sorts. So it's good for idea generation, that book.
Good.
Great. So on to some common mistakes. Now, it's sort of difficult to know how to focus these, but I've just narrowed them down to 5 themes here, and maybe that might prompt some questions towards the end. The first one is lots of people want to try lots of new things, and that's fantastic. I would never discourage anyone from trying new things, but you really have to get the basics right first. So you need to understand your conversion rate. You need to look at your average order value and what influences it. So for instance, are there upsells that you could offer on your product, or cross sells, or is there a way that you could increase your prices to increase your average order value? Is your tracking working properly? So that's absolutely vital. If you're paying for any traffic, you need to ensure that it's being tracked correctly. Do you have an email list? So if you're the type of business that can repeat sell to customers, email is really your best way to do that. Are you collecting customer reviews? This one, it's still surprising to me that some sites that have been trading for quite a while don't have this. If you're engaging with a new brand and they don't have customer reviews or any sort of social proof, you're really pushing against a closed door in terms of trying to improve your conversion rate. You need to have some sort of evidence that you're a credible business if you're a new brand. Site speed as well is vital for e-commerce, or really any sort of conversion focused site. So I'm sure that's something Joel knows a lot about, is optimizing for site speed and its influence on the overall performance of the site's commercials.
Yeah, I mean, speed is important for any site, and it's essential for SEO. But I'm sure, yeah, for anything like e-commerce, you need to have it responsive, so they make that next step. Yeah.
Absolutely. It plays it's strange because it does play quite a subtle role in the user experience, but the numbers are absolutely black and white on it. Faster is better for virtually every reason.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I mean, if you explain to people the differences in speed, they wouldn't. It just seems like infinitesimally small. But as you say, user tests show that the drop off on any kind of slowdown is tangible.
Absolutely right. And like sometimes it's easy to forget we are users of sites like this as well. And when you go onto a site and you notice it's slow, it's annoying. Or if you go onto a site and you get aggressively retargeted with ads afterwards and you find it annoying, then it's probably going to be annoying for your customers too. So it's easy to disconnect between our own experiences and those of our customers, but it's always good to get to know your customer, as I'll talk about in a bit.
Yep.
Another is I get 10x ROAS. So what that means is for every pound that I spend, I generate 10 back. Now that is incredible, but most likely if you're doing that, it's going to be retargeting, So you're showing ads to people that have already visited your site. And many of those are probably going to convert anyway. Now, there's nothing wrong with retargeting, but looking at that as a standalone metric is kind of like looking at people that are in a queue to buy a pizza and showing them a flyer that has a discount for the pizza that they were about to buy anyway. So you're not generating additional demand there. You might be convincing some people to see the thing through, but you're not creating additional demand. This is not how you're going to scale your business off of retargeting only. So it's an absolutely vital part of the mix. But if you focus on that alone, it's really just quite deceptive. So ROAS itself is the sort of gold standard for how advertising is measured. We tend not to look at it as the primary metric. We look at profit, as I showed in the earlier slide. It is important, but with many, many caveats. So just be aware of that, especially if you're appointing an agency that goes on and on about ROAS performance rather than profit. Right, number 3. So I can't see it in Google Analytics, so it didn't happen. Most e-com businesses, even on the larger size, rely on Google Analytics as their primary source of truth for user behavior. And that's because it's a great and well-established tool, but it's not the only set of data that matters. And because we happen to do a lot of audience-based advertising, so Facebook and Instagram and so on, a lot of the demand that we generate is shown on a phone. So you're going to see the ad on your mobile device. You might click in there, but you're probably not going to convert directly after that click. You're probably going to switch across to a different device if you're going to buy immediately, or search for that brand later, more likely. So when we run Facebook ads, we generally see a very large uptick in branded search, so people searching for that company's name on Google and then buying. So Google's going to tell you that your SEO is doing brilliantly, but really in that particular example, it's Facebook that's doing the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
So don't be discouraged if you can't see things in Google Analytics that you believe are happening. Data is not as black and white as anyone would like it to be. And I think especially if you're doing any sort of advertising that doesn't rely on the last click, then just be wary of the numbers that you see there.
Fine. Yeah, makes sense.
Great. Talking with customers, I feel like this should go without saying, but it doesn't go without saying. Many of our clients do not talk to their customers anywhere near as much as they should. And there seems to be a general, at least with many of the people we've spoken to, a feeling that it's better to look at 1,000 customers in data form than talk to 10. Now, both have their benefits, of course, but with 1,000 customers, you get many different viewpoints and you can sort of average things out and figure out who those customers are and try to infer what they want. But when you mix that with actually talking to your customers and finding out individual stories and finding out that actually they're quite different from one another potentially, or maybe there's different groups of them that you can start to look at separately. I've never regretted doing this, and I've done this on behalf of our customers. I've done it many different ways, but picking up the phone, talking to a customer, or just simply sending them a link to schedule a call with you, potentially rewarding them with a discount on their next order, whatever it takes, 15 minutes on the phone with a customer is 15 minutes well spent.
Yeah, I agree.
And finally, lack of structure when testing new things. So don't change too much at once is really the message here. Change only as much as you can measure in a reasonable amount of time. So, for example, don't change all of your PPC campaigns at once at the same time as running a discount, or don't introduce an affiliate scheme at the same time as redesigning your site. Just let things take a bit of time and try to gather as much data in isolation as possible. I know this is easier said than done, especially if it's in the early stages and everything is changeable, but just try to put some structure and discipline around what you're testing at any given time. Great. So that's the end of my presentation. I hope that was useful.
Very interesting.
Great. So yeah, any questions? I'd be very happy to hear them, Joel.
There was one question submitted in before, which is asking about what are the potential trends we're currently seeing in e-commerce?
Yeah, so there's a few that I think are notable. The first, most obvious one is much more trade is shifting online. So there's been a vast shift year on year, primarily because of COVID, into e-commerce. So e-commerce as a slice of the overall retail pie is growing massively. I think it's something along the lines of 10 percentage points. So it's absolutely enormous in monetary terms. The second thing I think is keep an eye on what the major players in the space are doing. So the Shopifys of the world integrating with Google so that you can check out within Google is a new feature. The shopification, if that's a word I'm allowed to invent, of platforms like Instagram, where people will be able to create demand and then eventually check out. So that's currently being tested. Those sorts of technology and platform changes are what we're most excited about, because I think the e-commerce shopping behavior is probably going to change fairly dramatically. If you'd asked me 6 months ago, I would also say some sort of experiential retail is important as well, and lots of these new D2C brands are pairing it with a sort of offline experience in concept stores and so on. I don't know what's going to happen with that for obvious reasons at the moment, but that was definitely a trend that was emerging as well.
It's funny you mentioned Instagram shops. I know that Helen's, I think, watching, and she's just recently got the Instagram shop authorized, so she's very excited about that, I think.
Great.
In terms of those trends, then, do we think this is a bit of a sort of a spike, or are behaviors changing long term, do you think?
I do think behaviors are changing long term. I mean, I think much in the same way that remote work has been forced on all of us, and those that run businesses that are remote first, like you and I both do, have already recognized that's a better way of working for many. And in that sense, I do think that lots more people are moving online for the first time in terms of what they're selling and how they're selling it. And I do think consumers are just ready for that kind of change now. I think it's sort of been forced upon them in a way. So things are happening much faster than I think they ordinarily would have.
Yeah, I agree. Well, guys, we're coming up to the end. So if anybody's got any questions, please drop them in there. One thing I was going to ask Nick as well, some of the people who will be watching this either now or during the replay, they might not be selling products, like a traditional e-commerce store, but they may well be thinking of getting in terms of selling digital downloads or finding ways to sort of monetize their, I suppose, traditional consultancy businesses. I'm sure the metrics and the things which you mentioned are valid to them, but I just wondered if you had any particular tips and ideas for that niche of the e-commerce end.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the answer depends on what sort of volume they're selling at. So the starting point for me is usually understand the customer as much as possible. So talk to people that have bought your digital products before, or if they're new, talk to people that have bought their equivalents before they were digitized, and just see how they describe your product and in what language, and try to use that language in the way that you sell it. In terms of just pure e-com stuff, that those customer journeys are usually shorter and more easily understandable than a traditional sort of multi-product setup. So if you're selling just 1, 2, or 3 digital products, you really only have to monitor a much simpler funnel. So in a lot of ways, that's actually easier to run. Okay. And I would say as well, in those sort of information products, email is probably just as important as any other channel. So if you're not going to sell to them, make sure that you can talk to them.
Yeah, excellent. What about any tools or any other services which you might use aside from Google Analytics? I know there's other tools which you can use to help analyze websites, or anything particular of importance in the e-commerce world you can think of off the top of your head, putting you on the spot?
Yeah, it depends on what scale you're operating at, again, but I think So there are some specialist e-commerce analytics platforms and customer communication platforms like Emetria, and there's one called Glue, that's Glew. And they're sort of in the thousands per month type territory, which is good value if you're at a certain scale, but probably out of reach of many smaller retailers.
Of course, yeah.
We tend to use a combination of Google Analytics, Facebook Analytics, and pull them together into our own reporting via a tool called Supermetrics.
Okay.
Facebook Analytics is surprisingly good these days and actually gives you a really good view on funnels and what people are doing on your site in a way that is probably superior to Google Analytics. So I'd definitely check out what your pixel is tracking, assuming you've got the Facebook pixel on the site.
Yeah. Talking to Facebook pixel, we may as well touch upon this. How do you think GDPR and everything like that is going to affect sites which use things like Facebook pixel? Because I would assume you need to accept the cookies and all that stuff before those pixels fire.
It's funny, Joel, because I don't know the answer to this, but my suspicion is that you have already accepted that by virtue of accepting Facebook's terms on their own site. So my understanding is because the pixel doesn't send any personally identifiable information, it is able to sort of skirt around that because it's Facebook that joins it up with a person at the other end who's accepted on that side. So my understanding is for potentially legally gray area reasons, it's exempt. I think the bigger one to worry about for marketers like us is the Safari's implementation of privacy features, which are fantastic for users, but very bad for marketers that rely on the surveillance economy to keep things tracking. So I think it'll probably be Apple that forces things in a certain direction, which will definitely provide some pain points for businesses like ours, but ultimately it's going to benefit the user.
There was a scare that the new version of Safari was going to block Google Analytics. I know that's been disputed since, but irrespective, it does show you the direction of travel, I suppose, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that scare was related to something they were already tracking but are now making more prominent. But absolutely, it's a trend that they are absolutely clear on, and I think they're only going to clamp down further on privacy. It's, like I said, it's good for the user, and actually for Apple as a company, I think it's a really strong differentiator as people start to become more aware of privacy concerns.
As a final question then, how are you seeing, and going back to trends really, I just thought of this one, how are we seeing trends in terms of mobile purchasing now? I mean, I know going back a couple of years, trying to buy something on your mobile phone, even on a smartphone, was an absolute nightmare, but it's getting more and more seamless now, I think.
Yeah, I think the mobile revolution is arriving every single year. But I think with a lot of the sites that we work with that are newer, they are truly built mobile first, and nothing else matters. Okay. And so other devices are of no concern to them as long as they work on mobile. With the more established businesses, they're still, being honest with you, one foot in both camps, and they're probably not delivering the best experience on either of those. For us, it really matters because almost all of the ad impressions we're serving are on mobile. So when they click, they're going to get a mobile site, and if that's no good, our campaigns won't work. So it's vital for us that that when we drive traffic, it goes through to a site that's designed for that device.
Good, excellent. Well, Nick, I think that we're up to about 40 minutes now, so that's not a bad time to finish. Have you got anything you would like to finish with? I know that if you've got any links and stuff, you can send those to me later on. I mean, or you can drop them into the Facebook group. But if you send them to me, I will put them into the show notes for the replay, so we can have all that there. But if you've got anything in particular you want to mention now, please go ahead, sir.
Nothing further to add, I think, Joel. There was one thing I was trying to surface, which was a Twitter thread of just some amazing other e-com advice that probably goes a lot deeper than what I spoke about.
Okay.
I'm going to try and locate that and send that through to you.
Excellent. Well, in which case then, sir, I won't keep any longer, and everybody there watching. That's it for our summer show. So I will be out for August now. There will be a minor event, I'm sure, during there. But failing that, we'll be back in September with new guests and new topics to explore. So everybody, thank you for tuning in. and hopefully see you next time. And it's bye from me, and it's bye from Mr. Nick Boyce. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me, Joel. Bye.
Lovely. So thank you.